I've been a caregiver for quite some time, and usually I hear everything about the patient. But I am dedicating my time to helping to educate the caregiver about themselves, their experience, how they're going to manage different facets of their experience. And so I have put together a year-long webinar series that I'm hoping will do just that for those that participate. I am recording the webinar, so please don't feel like you can't go back at a later time and take notes. You can definitely download it and listen to it over and over again. I'll be sharing it on a blog, and it'll be readily available for you to refer to at a future time. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce the presenter for this evening, Mr. Charlie Martino of Gerontecture. Charlie has been a long-distance caregiver for his dad and mom and aunt in New York for the past several years. And since his mom and aunt have passed, Charlie still continues with his monthly week-long visits to care for his dad. So he is a long-distance caregiver. He has spent his life helping others. He devoted over 20 years as a member of the volunteer fire rescue squads in New York and Virginia, 6 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, and professionally licensed as a healthcare architect for projects such as nursing homes and Alzheimer's facilities. His passion is to help others in the community, and I have personally witnessed him in that effort. He and I have worked together on some different community ventures as well. And so he extends to work with individuals that have intellectual disabilities and programs in horticultural therapy. This lifelong ambition of his of caring for others has prompted Charlie to complete his graduate work from Virginia Commonwealth University in Gerontological Specialist. Charlie's firm, Gerontecture, provides services to help families that are caring for a loved one by reducing stress and restoring balance at home and in the workplace. So, Charlie, without further ado, I am going to hand it over to you, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Terrific, Janae. Thanks so much. Let's see. You may have to push a button, Janae, to get my slideshow back up. That's great. Thank you, Janae. I think you may have to hit one more button, please, to get my slideshow back up. Or maybe I can do it from my side.
Look, Charlie, I was seeing your screen, and then now it disappeared. But while we're waiting for Charlie to come back on, we thank everybody that is still signing on. I hear people coming in, so at least everybody will be able to catch it from the beginning. Up, Charlie, I see you're back with us. Charlie, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see here. Okay. I see we have a screen with why develop a care plan.
Yes.
So let me see if I can pull down.
Oh, I see your screen loading.
There we go.
All right. Technology, you gotta love it.
I know. You hit one button and we are off the air. Well, okay. Welcome, everyone. Let's just jump right in. I see we have a nice crowd. I welcome everyone. Let's see. We are going to just jump right into the deep end of the pool and set the stage. So let me start and set the stage to share that family caregiving is really a journey in life. No matter what kind of help you provide to someone, caregiving is a journey with twists and turns along the way. Circumstances change, care needs change, options for care change. It's also a learning process. Sometimes you may doubt you're doing the right thing, or if you're doing enough. A care plan provides the caregiver with the tools to successfully navigate along this life journey. I will share with you how to break down this journey into manageable pieces. So let's get started. The agenda I have for this evening to share is going to cover some terminologies, maybe some new terms you haven't heard before, demographics of our aging society, where are we in this world of aging and individuals around us? What's a family caregiver? We're going to talk about family caregiver awareness. What do we really need to plan? We'll talk about why is a plan important and some of the issues related to the plans themselves. So let's talk about terminology first. I like to start out by sharing with individuals the difference between a geriatrician and a gerontologist. Gerontology has been around for some time, but many folks ask, gee, Charlie, gerontology, do you like to work with rocks? So, no. A geriatrician is the medical doctor that helps older adults being over the age of 65, and he will help them with pathologies, different changes within at a cellular level, the medical doctor. Versus the gerontologist, we have clients, not patients. Our clients, we focus in on all the other aspects of aging related to psychological, social, and spiritual aspects of aging. So we really focus in on the quality of life issues. The aging in place really is defined by the Center for Disease Control as the ability to live in one's own home and community safely, independently and comfortably, regardless of age, income, or ability level. The care receiver is an older adult with dependencies or individual with chronic illness or intellectual disabilities. Well, a new normal, we see that a lot. I hear about this at support groups. Hey, Charlie, Dad never did this before. What do I do? Okay, well, new normals are changes to the care receiver, things that we have not seen our loved ones do before. Family caregivers versus professional caregivers. Well, we're talking about family caregivers like you and I. We are unpaid versus the professional caregivers who are individuals that come in and would provide services for pay. A threshold we're going to talk about. There's a lot of psychological aspects of caregiving that we're going to talk about, and that's really a point or level at which something begins or changes, which you'll see is important when we talk about self-identifying. And then a care planning terminology really is the process of thinking about and organizing activities required to achieve a certain goal. So let's kind of look at and understand what's happening within our society with so many older adults. So I'm going to take you through what we call the age wave. So let's take a step back in time, and we're looking in the 1950s when the baby boomers first arrived. In this slide, you can see that 42% of the population change was a result of the new baby boomers coming into existence. As we move through a decade in the 60s, you see that half the population is representing this age wave. And here in the 60s, you see the baby boomers as teenagers. Here in the 70s, you see that still strong, almost half of the population in the 70s. The age wave is moving through in the 1980s. Here you see in the 1990s. And then here is the growth in the past decade we just came out of. And here's the wave moving through to the year 2020, which is the projection. So you can see this is a significant impact in our society, and we're going to talk more about the numbers here in this next slide. 12% of our population, of our U.S. population, are individuals over the age of 65 today. In the greater Williamsburg area, which is Upper York County, James City County, and the city of Williamsburg, interestingly, is twice that national average. Now, what brings rise to question and concern is in 2020, when the baby boomers that you saw on the last slide is really peaked to its highest level, nationally, the 12% is projected to double. As you see in the Williamsburg area, today we're at 25%, but by 2020, that's projected to double. So we could be looking at individuals in our particular area of Virginia, at half of the individuals are 65 years of age or older. So this brings to light some challenges of our aging society that you could see. It brings up challenges in health issues, housing issues, challenges in mobility for older adults, financial issues. Gee whiz, are older adults going to run out of money as they're getting older? And then quality of life issues. Do they engage within the community? Are they socially active? And so on. So let's look at part of a culture that we'll call traditional. When we were growing up in generations before us, it was understood that education was an important piece of life. Sorry about that little pen that slid down there, but education was an important piece of life, that you go out and get a good education. That follows suit, then you'll get a good job and you work hard, and then you're going to retire. That's the traditional paradigm of the culture that we lived in. What's occurring now is a new chapter in life, which is this longevity bonus. We, in our generations and current generations, are going to see more individuals living longer. We're going to see more centenarians, individuals over the age of 100. The health in this country has been improving, and individuals are living longer. So, does an individual that's retired or that's living longer want to take this longevity bonus at the end when they're older and they might not have enough money, or their health might not be quite as good? Well, what's happening is the longevity bonus is being divided up amongst additional work activities. So instead of just taking it all at the end, they're divvying this all up. They're going back to work, they're going back to school and finding encore careers. And so this is the new, this is what's happening in our new society. So now let's talk about caregivers. Why is that important? Well, we're going to find that caregiving unto itself is a very, for example, let's define a caregiver for some of the folks that might be on the edge of understanding. A caregiver, you might be shopping for groceries once a week for a homebound relative or neighbor, help an aging parent with finances, or provide hands-on for a member of your household. The need for care may have occurred suddenly or gradually. If you provide assistance to someone who's disabled or who needs help, day-to-day activities, so you, like many other Americans, are a caregiver. And what's interesting that we'll talk about later is that we do not often self-identify that we're a caregiver. We're just being a good son or spouse or friend. We will see that only when we do self-identify later on in this presentation that we are a caregiver, and we can then begin to enjoy healthy and productive caregiving during our journey. So, who are family caregivers? Family caregivers are unpaid members that help another individual. They spend more than 20 hours per week as a caregiver. Family caregivers are not professionals, as I pointed out earlier in the earlier slide. The family caregivers are friends, neighbors, and coworkers. You and I and all the others that are listening to this presentation, we are part of 30% of the U.S. population that are representing family caregiving. And if we were to quantify if family caregivers were paid, if we tried to quantify that number, it would be in this $450 billion a year value. And just to give you an idea of how much money that is, we're talking about, that's equivalent to the national budget for Medicare in this country. So it's a significant amount of money. So the new generation of caregivers, as I shared, 30% of the population is equating to about 65 million individuals that are family caregivers. I shared earlier, caregivers do not self-identify their role. We're finding through research that 60% or more than half of caregivers' health is fair to poor. They're under a lot of stress. There's a lot of things to balance, and we'll talk about some of those a little bit later. And of course, a lot of family caregivers lack the knowledge and a plan to be a caregiver. And what's interesting here too is that 50% of family caregivers are employed. If we drill down a little bit more and we look at employed family caregivers, what's occurring in our country through research with MetLife and AARP is that U.S. employers have been spending $33 billion a year on covering these family caregivers, employees that are family caregivers. Because the family caregivers are, and if any of you are working out there and part of this cohort, of working family caregivers, you know that there are days you have to miss work. There are days that your boss has to cover for you, or your supervisor has to cover for you while you're not there. That costs money. There are many times I'm sure that a lot of your heads are nodding when I say you're at work and you get an interruption from a family member or your care receiver that says, I need to talk to you about this, or you may have to go online and schedule appointments. And so efficiency for workers is very low. That costs employers money. Employees leave. That costs employers money. And employees are taking unpaid leave. And then on top of that, the family caregivers are costing employers an additional $13 billion per year on top of the $33 billion, because now these caregivers that we shared earlier that have more than half are not well, now they have to go to the doctor, and then at the end of the day, the employers, if they have insurance through employment, those employers are paying for that. Excuse me. In this slide, I wanted to share with you just very briefly, and not going into the depth of it. I use this a lot at my support groups or other talks. I could spend a whole session on talking about stages of caregiving and drilling down to what's occurring at each level. But as caregivers, one of the realities, the takeaway on this is there's a beginning, a middle, and unfortunately an end to caregiving. We don't like to think that way, but death is part of life. And as a knowledgeable caregiver, we learn how to use coping mechanisms during the tough times, and later in caregiving actually enjoy the rewards of caring for a loved one. These different caregiving skills are acquired through caregiver classes, support groups, and professional organizations. Professional organizations like the Alzheimer's Association. So let's take a look now at some of the greatest struggle of any caregiver is to continue on their journey day to day without a plan. Much like taking a Sunday drive when we were growing up with no destination or time frame in mind, other than getting back before dark. That's the Sunday drive. Versus compare that to taking a family vacation, which is planned where you're going to go, how long you're going to stay, what we will see, and how much it costs. We as caregivers need to have a care plan to navigate through this journey. But where do we start? There's so many pieces and parts to it. The first step in preparing a care plan is to self-identify that I am a caregiver. So this self-identity, as you're going to see how important that is as we walk through this part, and then we'll get into the mechanics of the care plan itself, step 1, step 2, step 3. But you know, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous or overeaters. You know, we have to step up and say, I am. And until we can recognize the I am a caregiver, then we're missing a lot of opportunities to help us and help our care receiver. So this slide really is the foundation of a care plan. Self-identity as a caregiver is most important, since all aspects of the resources outside of the home start to come into focus. Up until then, we're just a good son, daughter, spouse, or friend. The key to self-identity is to know how to recognize and manage change around us. What are the new normals of the care receiver? And how do I utilize outside resources to help me cope? I'd like to share the thought, if you were to build a house, you would not just use a hammer. You would utilize a series of tools, construction materials, and follow a plan. Caregivers, unfortunately, don't have the tools, knowledge, or skill sets to plan and wind up reacting to changes in crisis each day as it comes. So many of the support groups I facilitate through the Alzheimer's Association bring to light that the caregiver cannot continue to be the sole person responsible for care for the care receiver. at least they cannot do it for long. So think of the flight attendant providing instructions in case of emergency. She tells you before the flight to, in the event of emergency, place the oxygen mask over your mouth and nose first before you help someone else. So, we as caregivers don't do that. We have a tendency to just extend ourselves to the limit, right? So as caregivers on the slide now, you see caregivers do experience these shifts in responsibilities. These are the triggers. These are the recognizable traits of a caregiver, of an individual that is caring for someone else, and as a result is a caregiver, right? So you have an individual where they're shifting in their responsibilities, have a lack of control of their schedule. There's different changing family pressures, an individual's personality or mood, physical health, mental health, maybe all changing and all out of whack. There may be a need to quit my job in the role that I'm taking on, and I'm losing touch with my social life. So these are all aspects that we need to self-identify with. And these next two slides really bring home the aspect of the caregiver, what's going on with the caregiver. As Janae shared with you all earlier in reading my bio, I've spent most of my life helping others, the volunteer fire and rescue and the Coast Guard, and I love all that, and I respond to 911. What's interesting now in my role in gerontology is, almost all of my clients call me with a crisis, and maybe that new normal is taking someone to the limits of where they are, and they can't take it anymore. So the caregivers that are out there that are listening, and the caregivers that are out there nationally that are in crisis mode, well, you're the majority, I'm afraid to say. It's in the 90 percentile. You have to hurry to make decisions during a crisis. You have to settle for what may be available at that particular time, for whatever resource there may be. It may cost more money to execute what you need to decide in this short period of time during a crisis. And then later on, you're going to be questioning your decisions. My sister and I had to go through this very same thing with my aunt when she was in the hospital and she got diagnosed with dementia, and they said she can't go home and live on her own. And they handed us a list and they said, okay, you call us when you find a place and then we can release her. Well, we had to scramble around to try to figure out what we're going to do. So pre-planning, we're talking about in this webinar is care plan. Well, pre-planning is something that we need to change the culture, the society, and have families have conversations ahead of time. Dad, I want to do the very best for you as you get older. What can we talk about? What is it you'd like to do? And we need to ramp up those conversations and get some details out of them. We need to prepare a care plan, which we'll talk about the mechanics of. We need to outline action items. We need to have help to identify and prepare our coping skills to improve our quality of life. So there's a lot that has to go into a care plan that we'll really look at. Okay, so we talked about crisis, and should the family caregiver not self-identify and find help, the next likely opportunity to discover their role is unfortunately through a crisis. Hopefully the family caregiver crisis is not too severe and is remembered simply as a learning experience. So far we have established the need for a care plan. The need for a care plan originates from some type of psychological change and awareness that the family caregiver self-identifies the need for help. Let's understand we can get outside resources for help, but we still need a care plan to navigate safely through this journey. Outside of care planning, I'd like to impress the need for planning that generally exists all around us in lots of different forms and fashions. In my past career as a healthcare architect, planning becomes and provides forethought to health, welfare, and safety. Without planning, in this case of this building, without proper planning, there's going to be a failure. I always am saddened when I see trees that are growing like this. The planning ahead can be for a few weeks, months, or even years. This tree is about 15 years old. The power lines above it existed years prior to, before someone decided to plant the tree under the power lines. Over those years, this tree has lost to the power lines as it has been brutally pruned, as you can see. Just this past year, the remaining tree limbs finally failed and the tree split in half. So if you look at what the tree should look like in a successful growth, you know, it's easy to see the success of having a care plan. The key to successful caregiving is to have a care plan in place before your threads of patients are really tested. The stressors are reaching a new magnitude and intensity, taking you to the edge of patients, often related to crisis. And again, this is where most caregivers reside, in crisis, day to day. So what I'd like to share with you is the symbolism of crossing a threshold from one physical space to another. In this case, crossing through a doorway. Related to family caregiving, this threshold provides a philosophical approach to crossing from a chaotic state of crisis to an organized, well-planned journey. This realization to self-identify now brings meaning and purpose to improve the caregiving experiences along this journey. Crossing this threshold is certainly symbolic. I like to associate it with another word that I use a lot is a portal. I reflect that on my monthly week-long trips to visit my dad. I associate the threshold as more of a portal when I take the plane or take the train. I emotionally become aware of walking through the doorway of the plane or the train and reconcile my thoughts that it's okay to leave my family in Virginia to go to New York and help my dad. So I'm self-identifying that this is okay. So now we've self-identified the first step to care planning, to acknowledge that we're a caregiver. Now we have to step back and see that there are so many issues to consider as a family caregiver. Now we start to look at the mechanics. We have to look at the things that we can control, and we have to identify the things we cannot control. You know, I've heard stories abound, but I'll share one that a caregiver was so struggling with the fact that his mom was putting the car keys in the refrigerator. Well, he asked me, you know, how are we going to make them stop? How is we going to make mom stop that? Well, what's so bad about the keys being in the refrigerator in the first place? Mom has a comfort level in wherever she happens to be in her life, in her state of mind, that the keys belong in the refrigerator. So that we need to balance the things that we can control and we can't control. So what does a care plan look like? Well, generally we think of a plan that may resemble any one of these. You could see something, a vacation plan, a business plan, any number of these elements. What's interesting is that all of these different elements, you see a health plan, an emergency plan, a financial plan, are all pieces and parts of a care plan that we'll see. So planning is the process of thinking about and organizing activities required to achieve a certain goal. That's the definition. Basically, we're stopping to give forethought to something. We just have to stop the train and take a look at what's around us and be able to put these pieces and parts in front of us. Planning is done for a number of reasons and oftentimes completed by a professional in the field. As you see, planning for some of these activities here in my you can see buildings. An architect is going to be responsible for designing buildings, bridges are engineers, and so on. So we have to identify that there are many things out there that require plans. Yet family caregiving with a care plan is somewhat distant and not really part of society, and that's what we really need to change. So what's included with a care plan? A concept or a need. We need to have that aha moment, right? We need to self-identify to make these changes. We're going to know that life's going to be better if I can get help. And who's on the planning team? Who are the individuals that are going to make up this team? Well, generally, the care plan team is going to be members of your family. It's going to be generally the PCP, the primary care physician. It could be a cardiac doc. It could be any of the other medical participants for the care receiver. Generally, we'll consult in a planning part of the planning team an elder law attorney if there isn't one engaged already to help, a financial consultant, and then a gerontologist or care manager that's going to help manage all this. The next element of the care plan is to identify the problems that we're going to overcome, and we'll need to identify these problems that need to be corrected. Maybe it's a problem of my decline in physical or emotional health. I may have a problem that there's no time to myself. Am I doing the right thing? So basically, identifying the problems, it come in two. It's this slide boiled down. A care plan is a written agreement with the family caregiver and the care receiver to help navigate and manage the day-to-day responsibilities. That's what we're talking about for the care plan. And it's basically comprised of two main columns, one of problems and the other of interventions. So there are several categories depending upon the goals, intended goals that we're going to try to achieve. Home safety, caregiver health that you see, and many others. The next element of the care plan deals with time. What are the actions that require the care plan? Remember, we discussed earlier that 95% of the caregivers react in a crisis versus planning ahead. One example of a care plan completed out of necessity is done prior to discharge from a hospital or rehab. That's a pretty common one that you see nowadays. But unfortunately, quite often these discharge plans are not carefully followed, and it results in a relapse and readmission into the hospital or facility. So I shared the story earlier about my sister and I having to make the decisions in haste. Time frame is a very important aspect of the plan based on the goals that are trying to be established in the plan. The next element of the concern is the financial considerations of the plan. Some of the financial issues may be related. Anything identified in the care plan that costs money to the caregiver or care receiver should have an identifiable projection of probable cost. How much is it going to cost? The exact cost can be determined later when it's time to execute that part of the plan. So you get a care plan, you don't, bite off all the pieces and parts at the same time. You just physically don't have time, and you've got to manage it. So, for example, when it's time to look at issues of the care plan, which one do you do first? Generally, safety rules. Safety goes first as a priority. The grab bars or additional lighting in a home may be done before you're going to spend money to build a room addition. The family, should really go out and get a couple of estimates from licensed contractors. They would then in turn submit an estimate, check references and proof of insurance, and establish a cost, and then move forward from there. But you can see the cost for home additions, the cost for technology, home security, wander management, PERS's personal emergency response system, the button I fall and I can't get up, and then any other related costs for professional services like a lawyer and so on. So then the last piece of the puzzle in the care plan is what we call metrics. And the metrics is the way we keep track of our progress. It's the checklist. It's the opportunity to write a little note over on the margin, say, this one is done. And what's very important about the care plan is that it's a fluid document. It's something that you need to keep up on the refrigerator. It's not something that winds up in your desk drawer. The care plan really needs to be updated regularly, and you'll see here the improvements, the gains that a care plan is going to provide. It's going to be, we're going to be, hopefully solving problems that are going to be related to caregiver or care receiver's health, the efficacy or the ability to be efficient and provide all the services that we can as a caregiver to our care receiver. Hopefully the care plan is going to improve safety in the home. It's going to help us respond and recognize and understand new normals are part of life and how we respond to those with our coping mechanisms. And it's an opportunity for time of self-reflection. A care plan will give us time to actually, believe it or not, where we are in the caregiving stages. It will give us an opportunity to relate to self-reflection and enjoyment. I have a stones in a pile story that I'll share that was very near and dear to me when it was told. Basically, a gentleman goes and each time he has a great moment with his dad, he goes out into the garden, he takes a stone and he starts to make a little pile of these stones in the garden. And then on days when he struggles with his dad or he just has to get away because things are way too stressful, he goes out into the garden. There's a seat next to the stones in a pile that he's created. And he sits and he reflects on all the wonderful moments that he had with his dad in that pile of stones that he sees. And it helps him self-reflect and cope with what's in front of him. Other gains from family caregiver plans is that we recognize and acknowledge our negative emotions. It's okay to be sad and happy and angry and all in one day. Care plan helps us understand how to be resilient and adapt to different changes and these new normals. It integrates how to understand how to use humor in our life. Again, it related to the stages. If you're a brand new caregiver out there, you're just getting started, the last thing you're thinking about is humor. It's nothing funny about all the stress I'm going through with the new change that mom doesn't recognize me anymore. But later on in the stages, when you become in the middle and 3/4 of the way through in caregiving, then you're realizing and understanding how to utilize your resources, how to utilize coping mechanisms that will help you. Just like the carpenter building the house, you're going to have lots of tools to call on to be able to help make adjustments in the way you are caregiving. And then we're going to learn too in a care plan that small changes mean a huge amount. just taking on a small change as a reward or as acknowledgement of care planning is a terrific thing to embrace. And then the care plan also connects us up with a number of community resources that are going to help us navigate through our journey with local, state, and federal resources. Some come with money, some come with respite or opportunities in different ways that we can step away from the caregiving situation and our loved ones taken care of so that we can have our own me time. So there's lots of different community resources out there that we can call on. So with that, my friends, I would say that I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to share a few gold nuggets that I hope would brighten your day and think about a care plan and how it might help you with your journey in caregiving. And I turn it back over to Janae for fielding any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie, very much. All right, everybody, do we have any questions for Charlie this evening? You guys can put them in the chat box. I will actually take everybody off.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
So if you want to actually ask a question, you can just push *6, or you can type your question inside the chat area. And I think I have a question for you, Charlie, that some people may be a little shy to ask. So I'll ask on behalf of everybody. When developing a care plan, what do you feel is the most challenging part of that process?
Oh, that's a great question, Janae. You know, participating with families' dynamics it is the most challenging part when we sit down and actually start to identify the problems that have to surface. You know, you got to scramble the egg before you make the omelet, and scrambling the egg and bringing all those dynamics to the forefront. The problem areas that have to be improved become quite a challenge for caregivers, care receivers, and friends and so on to all hear and listen and kind of take on. So that's probably the most difficult part of getting over the hill, or the first step of getting into all the conversation is the tough part.
Exactly. I agree that family dynamics is definitely a big challenge. Also, what about the resources in the community? Where would where would a caregiver begin? You know, say they're at the beginning of their journey and they don't have our experience. So what would be your suggestion on where to begin to actually look for some of these resources?
Yeah, again, a great question, Janae. I always like to steer folks to a comfort level that helps them brings them into perspective of where they are and where they need to be. And the best place for that, for anyone that's a caregiver, is to go on to, alz.org. That is the website for the Alzheimer's Association. And at alz.org, you look up support groups in your area. You punch in your zip code, and you find a support group. And there's no cost. It's a safe, confidential, a very welcoming environment of other individuals in there. There are support groups for men only. There are support groups for men and women. And then they also have support groups for caregivers and care receivers. But I would highly recommend attending one for just caregiver. And it doesn't cost anything. I would suggest that you call when you look online. You're going to want to just call the support group facilitator and verify that they're still at that same time, just to verify the information in there is correct, the location and the time, Janae. And that way, you get to go there, you get to meet other caregivers, you get to see right away that you're not alone, and then it starts to bring to light the other stories you hear from individual caregivers that are so powerful. You'll sit there and say, gee, I thought I was all alone doing this. I thought my stories were I thought my world was in a shamble being a caregiver, but wow, I just heard that other person tell their story, and that makes my stuff seem very in perspective now. So that's a great place to go.
Great. And Charlie, if any of our attendees would like to get in contact with you, I'm sure you're more than happy to answer any questions. And can you just give us a little background on what you actually can help some of our attendees accomplish in their care planning goals?
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you for asking. Just real quick, I think that they still have the slide up, my last slide with my contact information.
Yes.
So you folks can jot down my phone or my email. When you contact me, my first consultation with a family is free. The complimentary consultation is to help establish a conversation. It's usually done around the kitchen table at your home. Many times a caregiver might just say, hey, Charlie, I just want to meet with you. I don't want to meet with my care receiver also at the same time. I want to hear what you have to offer and suggest. So the opportunity is really to first sit down and talk. There's no writing. There's no obligation. There's just an opportunity to talk and listen, for me to listen and understand what you're going through out there. As a firefighter, every fire is different. You use the same tools to put the fires out, but there's a lot of strategy that has to go into looking at these fires and seeing how they're what's burning, how long it's been burning, and how we're approaching it. And I use those same skill sets amazingly today when a caregiver calls and I'll say, Janae, you're caring for a loved one, and so tell me about how long you've been doing it, where it's going on, what's going on with the care receiver, how you've been feeling, and really get to know each other. And then I explain to them later at the end of that first visit, if they care to move forward, then each individual program for preparing a written care plan is really dependent on the need of each family.
Great. You do some awesome work, and I thank you again for taking time to share with all of us your insight and expertise about care planning. I think it's an important topic that we need to discuss even more. And as you mentioned earlier in your presentation, we as a society, we just don't put as much effort into planning for these type of situations like we do for our vacations.
Right.
And so we end up having to make some tough choices and some very difficult times of uncertainty and challenges. So I thank you again for your willingness to participate. And by all means, everyone, if you need to talk to Charlie, I really encourage you to call or email him with any questions that may arise after all of this has kind of melted into your brain. Sometimes you don't come up with questions while you're intensively listening, but after you have a chance to think about what was said this evening, you might come up with some questions at a later time. So Charlie, thank you again. And if no one else has any questions, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. And the next webinar that we're going to have is going to be myself. I'm going to be talking about managing as a caregiver and how do you balance it all. After being a caregiver for so long, I really had to adopt a different lifestyle. And so, as Charlie mentioned in his presentation, there are different stages of caregiving, and after you've done it, gotten to a certain stage, you kind of get a rhythm. So I'm going to talk about how you can get that rhythm and how you can kind of stay in that sweet spot, if that's a way to think about it. But there are definitely a lot of gains to being a caregiver. So please stay tuned to us on Facebook and on our website at carekeepersinc.com and stay abreast of all the upcoming webinars. We're going to have some more great speakers and some more great topics to help you on your journey to better health and wellness as a caregiver this year. So thanks, Charlie. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.